How conscious would you say that you are? The first thing that I want to really say is, how much of a question really is this for you? Like, how regular a question is that for you? How conscious am I? I guess the greater, even deeper question is, how much do you comprehend how conscious you are? And the reason that you might want to even think this, not even out of just sheer interest, is because, I guess the next question is how much do you realize how much consciousness is affecting you and your life, and significantly maybe even your happiness? You see, the thing about us as humans, beings, people, adults, the thing about us is we do things that we don't even realize every day, that we don't even realize can impact us, impact our mind, our soul, our personality, our lives. We do things in the short term, even though we might have hopes and dreams for the long term. We do things in the short term that impacts the long term, and so many things, so many hopeful versions of ourselves often don't end up coming to fruition. The people who in life who do end up making a lot of solid things, goals, happen, they often do realize this truth, that at the end of the day their lives and their dreams are determined by the now, are determined by what they're doing now, what they think now, and how they live their lives on that day. And I guess if we bring it back to consciousness, you could say that consciousness isn't just determined by how, or isn't exactly, it isn't exactly just you being mindful and present. There is so much more to what consciousness is, yes. So if we zero in on mindfulness itself, how mindful you are of who you are right now and what you're doing right now and today, yes, people who fight for that extra degree of mindfulness, they often find themselves able to be in control of themselves even more. And they control themselves even more and exercise a discipline and a resilience, a consciousness of them knowing that the build-up of all of these accumulatory, immediate, healthy, fulfilling actions will ultimately result in a more refined, dream-full version of themselves and their lives in the future. You see, we should get into specifics, because the specifics would then infer that there must be some kind of element to which we must be mindful of. Sorry, not the specifics would infer, but the notion, the idea of there even being specifics would mean that there is a practical, technical way in which we would think of how we could really unravel this dreamful, long-term, future, greater version of ourselves, our individual selves. So when you really think about it, it all really goes back into the neurochemical side of life, of you. Ultimately, we can be broken down into what we could say is dopamine, the neurochemical, the motivation neurochemical in which we are often essentially designed around, because we have dopamine in our bodies and we have a renewed dopamine every day at the start of every day, and then how we use the dopamine ultimately defines that day. And then how we use the dopamine on that one particular instance could ultimately influence the dopamine in how we could use it in the next particular instance. And ultimately, when we use it unfruitfully, unhealthily, in a way that is short-term and cheap, when we go on our phones and scroll, or when we eat that junk food, or when we watch pornography, or when we simply just choose a higher stimulating but easier to get form of pleasure and gratification, when ultimately that happens, we can then condition ourselves to do that even further, and before we know it, that is ultimately who we become and who we are. And this is something that so many people, including myself, learn and go through in this modern current cultural climate of the world in our 20s. It stems from your teenage years, when you lose that innocence as a child. And before you know it, for those who can even lack a greater level of impulse control and a greater mindfulness inherently in themselves, they can get lost in this trap of really limiting their potential by not utilizing the dopamine that they're rewarded at the start of every day in a greater way for their own selves, for the world at large. So yeah. How conscious are you? How mindful are you? You might want to think of just at least being mindful of the things that you do on the very micro, minute scale. Push yourselves, get out of the comfort zone willingly. Take the cold shower, boost the dopamine healthily like that. Be consistent with healthy living, mind and physical wise. And be conscious of how you could be more mindful, and you never know. Consciousness cannot be limited to such a discussion, to such topics. It is something, in my opinion, that encompasses so much. It encompasses the spiritual, it encompasses the neurochemical, it encompasses the psychological, even the cosmological. But you never know. You become more mindful of such things. In time, you never know. You could also inherently, naturally then become more conscious. And then you would see what that's like. Because there is certainly nothing ever wrong with being more conscious. That is how you get the winning life. Anyway, I hope this was some kind of useful intellectual thought activity for you, because it certainly was for me. And for the next time, I'll see you on the other side.